My name is Sarah, and I'm 28 years old. For the past 3 years, I've been living in my older brother Mark's house in suburban Denver, Colorado. What started as a temporary arrangement after I lost my job during the pandemic has stretched into something that feels permanent and honestly suffocating. The Colorado autumn air was crisp that October evening when everything changed. I could smell the familiar scent of pine trees mixed with the aroma of my sister-in-law Jennifer's famous pot roast drifting from the kitchen. The house was filled with the usual sounds of family life, my 8-year-old nephew Tommy practicing piano in the living room, and my 6-year-old niece Emma chattering about her day at school. I had just returned from another unsuccessful job interview. The rejection email was still fresh in my inbox, and my confidence was at an all-time low. I walked through the front door, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor, and immediately felt the weight of everyone's expectations. "How did it go?" Jennifer called from the kitchen, her voice carrying that tone of cautious optimism that I'd grown to dread. "Not great," I replied, hanging my blazer on the coat rack. Mark emerged from his home office, loosening his tie after another long day at his accounting firm. He looked at me with those concerned eyes that reminded me of our father. "Sarah, we need to talk after dinner," he said quietly. My stomach dropped. I knew that tone. It was never good news. Dinner was served at exactly 6:30, as it had been every night for the past 3 years. Tommy and Emma bounded into the room, their faces still flushed from playing outside in the October cold. "Aunt Sarah, guess what happened at school today?" Emma exclaimed, bouncing in her chair. "What happened, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to inject enthusiasm into my voice despite the growing anxiety in my chest. "Mrs. Peterson said my drawing of our family was the best in the class." Emma beamed, her gap-toothed smile lighting up the room. As we began eating, the conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. Jennifer talked about her work at the local elementary school. Mark discussed a difficult client, and the kids chattered about their friends and upcoming Halloween plans. I sat there mechanically cutting my food and nodding at appropriate moments, but my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about the interview that morning, how the hiring manager's eyes had glazed over when I'd tried to explain the gap in my employment history. "Sarah, you've been awfully quiet," Jennifer observed. "Everything okay?" Before I could answer, Mark cleared his throat. The sound seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet dining room. "Actually, Jennifer and I wanted to discuss something with you, Sarah." Mark's voice was careful, measured. "We've been talking, and we think it might be time for you to consider other living arrangements." The words hit me like a physical blow. My fork clattered against my plate, and I felt heat rush to my cheeks. "Other living arrangements?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Jennifer reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine, but not quite touching. "It's not that we don't love having you here, Sarah. You know that's not it." "Then what is it?" The words came out sharper than I intended, and I saw Tommy and Emma exchange worried glances. Mark set down his fork and looked directly at me. "You've been here for 3 years, Sarah. 3 years. And in that time, you've had 4 different jobs, none of which lasted more than 6 months. You contribute minimally to household expenses. And frankly, Jennifer and I feel like we're enabling you rather than helping you." "Enabling me?" I stood up so quickly that my chair scraped against the floor. "I've been trying, Mark. Do you think I enjoy living in my childhood bedroom at 28? We know you didn't plan it," Jennifer said softly. "But Sarah, you have to understand our position. We have our own children to think about, our own future to plan for." I looked around the table at the faces of my family. Mark's expression was resolute but pained. Jennifer looked guilty but determined. Tommy was staring at his plate, clearly uncomfortable. And Emma was looking at me with those wide, innocent eyes. "You ruin every meal," Mark said suddenly, his voice rising slightly. "Every single family dinner becomes about your problems, your job search, your struggles. We can't have a normal conversation without it somehow circling back to how difficult things are for you." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire. I felt them settle into my chest, heavy and suffocating. When was the last time I'd asked Jennifer about her day without immediately launching into my own problems? When was the last time I'd really listened to Tommy's stories about school, or helped Emma with her homework without being distracted by job applications? "I see," I said finally, my voice steady, despite the trembling I felt inside. "How long do I have?" "We thought maybe by the end of November," Jennifer said quietly. "That gives you 6 weeks to figure something out." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. 6 weeks to find a job that paid enough to afford rent in Denver's inflated housing market. Can I be excused? I asked, reverting to childhood politeness in the face of overwhelming emotion. Mark nodded, and I turned to leave the dining room. As I reached the doorway, I heard Emma's small voice behind me. Daddy, why is Aunt Sarah sad? I didn't wait to hear Mark's response. I spent the rest of that evening in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of normal family life continuing downstairs. The room around me was a shrine to a person I used to be. My high school graduation photo sat on the dresser, showing a confident 18-year-old with big dreams. My college diploma hung on the wall in a frame that was starting to show its age. How had I gotten here? How had the girl who'd graduated summa cum laude ended up back in this room, being asked to leave by her own brother? I thought about the series of small failures that had led to this moment. The first job out of college at a local newspaper that folded after just 8 months. The marketing position at a startup that ran out of funding. Each rejection, each setback, had chipped away at my confidence until I'd become someone I didn't recognize. Around 10 o'clock, I heard Mark and Jennifer putting the kids to bed. After the house grew quiet, there was a soft knock on my door. "Come in," I called, expecting to see Mark or Jennifer ready to continue our difficult conversation. Instead, Tommy's face appeared around the doorframe. He was in his Spider-Man pajamas, his dark hair sticking up in all directions. "Can I come in, Aunt Sarah?" he asked quietly. I sat up on my bed, surprised. "Of course, buddy. What's up?" He padded across the room in his bare feet and climbed onto the bed beside me. For a moment, we sat in comfortable silence, both of us staring out the window at the streetlight casting long shadows across the front yard. "Are you really leaving?" Tommy asked finally, his voice small in the darkness. I felt my throat tighten. "It looks that way, sweetheart. Because Dad said you ruin every meal?" The question was so direct, so innocently honest, that it took my breath away. I turned to look at him, this little boy who'd grown up with me as a constant presence in his house. "Maybe," I admitted. "I think your dad and mom need some space, and maybe I haven't been the best housemate." Tommy considered this seriously. "I don't think you ruin every meal," he said finally. "Remember last week when you helped me with my science project? And you made those funny voices when we were testing the volcano?" I did remember. We'd spent hours building a papier-mâché volcano for his earth science class, and I'd insisted on giving dramatic voiceovers as we made it erupt with baking soda and vinegar. Jennifer had laughed so hard she'd snorted, and even Mark had smiled. "That was fun," I agreed. "And you always listen when I tell you about school. Really listen. Not like when adults pretend to listen, but they're really thinking about other stuff." I felt tears prick at my eyes, out of the mouths of babes. "Tommy, you know your dad and mom love you and Emma very much, right? And they want what's best for your family?" He nodded. "Yeah, I know, but your family too." Those words hit me harder than Mark's dinner table declaration. I was family too. But somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten how to be a good family member. I'd become so focused on my own problems that I'd forgotten to contribute positively to the people who'd opened their home to me. "You're right," I said softly. "I am family. And family members should help each other, not just take from each other." Tommy leaned against me, his small body warm against my side. "Will you visit us when you move out?" "Of course I will. And maybe when I have my own place, you can come stay with me sometimes. We could have movie nights and eat ice cream for dinner." He giggled at that. "Mom would never let us eat ice cream for dinner." "Well, that's what aunts are for," I said, ruffling his hair. "Breaking the rules sometimes." After Tommy went back to his room, I pulled out my laptop and started making lists. Not job applications this time, but something different. I made a list of all the ways I'd been taking from Mark and Jennifer without giving back. Then I made a list of my skills, my actual talents that I'd been too depressed and self-pitying to recognize. I was good with kids. Tommy and Emma always came to me when they needed help with creative projects. I was an excellent writer, even if the newspaper industry was dying. I was organized, detail-oriented, and despite my recent struggles, I was educated and capable. By the time I fell asleep that night, I had the beginning of a plan. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, typical October weather in Colorado. I woke up before my alarm, feeling more clear-headed than I had in months. I could hear Jennifer in the kitchen making breakfast and Mark getting ready for work. I took a long shower, put on my best interview outfit, and went downstairs to face the music. "Good morning," I said, as I entered the kitchen. Jennifer was at the stove making scrambled eggs while Tommy and Emma ate cereal at the breakfast bar. "Morning, Aunt Sarah," Emma chirped. "Look, I lost another tooth." "Wow, the tooth fairy's going to be busy tonight," I said, genuinely smiling for the first time in weeks. Jennifer glanced over at me, taking in my professional attire. "Job interview today?" "Actually, no," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "I wanted to talk to you and Mark about something." I found Mark in his office, typing on his laptop. He looked up when I knocked on the doorframe. "Sarah, if this is about last night..." "It is, but not the way you think," I interrupted. I wanted to apologize. Mark's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Apologize? You were right about dinner, and about a lot of other things. I have been making everything about my problems. I've been so focused on my own struggles that I forgot to be grateful for everything you and Jennifer have done for me." Mark leaned back in his chair, studying my face. "Okay, I also wanted to propose something. You said I have 6 weeks, and I accept that timeline. But I want to spend those 6 weeks not just looking for a job and a place to live, but also giving back to this family." "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. "I mean, I want to contribute, really contribute. I could pick up Tommy and Emma from school every day, help with homework, do grocery shopping and meal prep on weekends. I could use my writing skills to help Jennifer with her classroom newsletter. I could organize your home office." Mark looked around the room, which admittedly looked like a paper bomb had exploded. "It's pretty bad," he admitted. "I've been acting like a guest who's overstayed her welcome instead of a family member who wants to contribute," I continued. "And that changes now." Mark was quiet for a long moment. "What about your job search?" he asked finally. "I'll still be looking, of course, but I'm going to be more strategic about it. I want to find something that actually uses my skills and interests me." Mark stood up and crossed to where I was standing. "Deal," he said as we shook hands. 6 weeks. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I threw myself into being the family member I should have been all along. I picked up Tommy and Emma from school every day, and instead of rushing them through homework, I really engaged with their assignments. I helped Emma practice her reading, and I discovered that Tommy had a real talent for creative writing. I reorganized Mark's home office, creating a filing system that actually made sense. Jennifer was amazed when Mark was able to find his insurance papers in under 30 seconds instead of the usual 20-minute treasure hunt. On weekends, I took over meal planning and grocery shopping, which freed up Jennifer's time. I discovered that I actually enjoyed cooking when I wasn't doing it out of obligation, and the kids loved being my sous chefs. But the biggest change was in our dinner conversations. Instead of making everything about my problems, I started asking real questions about everyone else's lives. I learned that Tommy was being picked on by a boy in his class, and we worked together on strategies for dealing with bullies. I discovered that Emma was worried about her best friend moving away. For the first time in 3 years, our family dinners became something I looked forward to. As for my job search, I completely changed my approach. Instead of applying for anything remotely related to my degree, I focused on positions that combined my love of writing with my newfound appreciation for helping families. 3 weeks into my 6-week deadline, something unexpected happened. I was picking up Emma from her after-school art program when her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, approached me. "Are you Emma's aunt?" she asked. "The one who's been helping her with her writing?" "Yes, that's me," I replied. "Emma showed me the story you helped her write about her stuffed elephant. It was remarkable. You have a real gift for encouraging children's creativity." I felt a flush of pride. "Thank you. Emma's got a great imagination. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. I run a creative writing workshop for kids on weekends, and my assistant just moved to California. I'm looking for someone to help me with the program. The pay isn't great, but it might be something you'd be interested in?" My heart skipped a beat. What would it involve? Helping kids aged 5 to 12 explore creative writing through games and activities. 2 hours on Saturday mornings, and about an hour of prep time during the week. That night at dinner, I shared the news with my family. "It's not a full-time job," I said, "but it's a start, and it's something I think I'd actually be good at." "You'd be amazing at it," Tommy said immediately. Over the next few weeks, the weekend job led to other opportunities. The community center hired me to help write their newsletter. A local parenting blog saw my work and asked me to contribute articles about creative activities for kids. It wasn't full-time work yet, but it was consistent income doing something I loved. More importantly, it gave me confidence. For the first time in years, I was working in areas where I felt competent and valued. 2 weeks before my move-out deadline, I found an apartment. It was small, a one-bedroom place about 15 minutes from Mark and Jennifer's house, but it was affordable and mine. When I told the family about it over dinner, Emma's face fell. "But we just started having fun with you living here," she said, her lower lip trembling. "Hey, remember what I told you about movie nights and ice cream for dinner?" I reminded her. "You can come visit me anytime your mom and dad say it's okay." The night before I moved out, we had a family dinner that was unlike any we'd shared in 3 years. Instead of tension and awkwardness, there was celebration and hope. Jennifer had made my favorite lasagna, and Mark had bought a cake that said, "Good luck, Sarah," in purple frosting. "I want to say something," I announced as we finished eating. "These past 6 weeks have been the best I've felt in years, not because I found work, but because I remembered what it means to be part of a family." Mark raised his glass of wine. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," we all echoed. As I looked around the table at these people who had supported me even when I didn't deserve it, I felt overwhelming gratitude. Tommy was sitting next to me, as he had that night weeks ago when everything started to change, and Emma was across from me, grinning with her gap-toothed smile. "You know what?" I said, looking directly at Mark. "You were right about me ruining meals, but I think we've figured out how to fix that." Mark laughed. "Yeah, we have." 6 months later, I was running 3 different writing workshops for kids and had been hired part-time by the school district. My apartment was small but cozy, decorated with artwork from my students and photos of Tommy and Emma. Every Sunday, I joined Mark and Jennifer's family for dinner. But now, instead of being the problem child who made everything about herself, I was the aunt who brought stories from her workshops, who helped with homework, who contributed to the family's happiness. The evening that started with those painful words, "You ruin every meal," had become the catalyst for the most important growth of my adult life. Sometimes, the most hurtful truths are the ones we most need to hear. As I tucked Tommy into bed during one of my weekend visits, he looked up at me with those serious 8-year-old eyes and said, "Aunt Sarah, I'm glad Dad told you that you ruined dinners." "You are? Why?" "Because now you make them better instead." Out of the mouths of babes indeed.